Shalom. In this video, I'd like to combat a perception that a lot of Christians and a lot of people who were raised in Christianity have. They see Jews as being tied down to 3,000-year-old laws with no relevance to today and no relevance to modern society, such as that. They see the Tanakh, which is the Jewish scriptures, what they call the Old Testament, as a bunch of so-and-so begat so-and-so and a bunch of stories. And they read those stories literally. And it doesn't matter if those stories were actually true or not. What really matters is what views and what ideas those stories portray. And Christians are only getting half of the story. You see, the traditional Jewish perspective is when Moses went up on Mount Sinai and got the Torah from God. He spent 30 days up there. Now, why do you think he spent 30 days up there? God couldn't write the Torah in less than 30 days? Well, God was giving him the written Torah and the oral Torah. And the oral Torah was what he was teaching him to be able to understand the written Torah. For instance, observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. How do you do that? What is meant by that? Well, that's where the oral Torah came in. And if you read in Deuteronomy 17, when people had questions as to the law of Moses, they would go to priests. They would go to judges. And these priests would tell them and instruct them on the right way to do things. Now, after the Roman sack of Jerusalem and destruction of the Second Temple, these Jewish scholars were being killed, and every time a Jewish scholar was killed, they risked losing part of that oral law. So what did they start doing? They started writing it down, and it became the Mishnah. The Mishnah was expanded upon and became the Gemara, and with further expositions, it became the Talmud. So you had a writing down of the traditional interpretations and application of the laws. And you can see something happening with a lot of these laws. God would say one thing in the Torah, and then it would be expounded upon in the oral tradition. Because it was said this way, we can infer this. It branched out, it adapted. So the idea that you weren't supposed to eat the limbs off of live animals, and you were supposed to help your neighbor get his ox out of the ditch and such as that, became laws against animal cruelty. And you can see how Jews fought for the women's suffrage movement, the end to child labor, the end to slavery and such, when if you just read the quote Old Testament word for word, you wouldn't see these things. But when you take the oral law along with the written law, then you can see these things begin to develop. You can see how these things are pulled out of the text. And you can really see how there's a world of things said in Torah that just a literal word by word reading of it, you wouldn't see. For starters, you're reading a translation, and you don't know that a word was used there that is significant, because it was rarely used, that this word would have normally been used in its place. You don't know that. You don't know that this phrase has special meaning. When it's translated, it loses meaning. You don't understand how radically different this command was for the culture and times it was in, and what it was a departure from. And you really strip the entire Tanakh of its holiness. It becomes a dry, bland, lifeless document when read from the King James. But when you see it through the eyes of Judaism, when you see it through the eyes of the rabbis, through the eyes of the oral law, you see a vibrant document that withstands the test of time. And you see things that you would never in a million years think you'd see in the Bible. For instance, the saying that if your neighbor seeks to kill you in the morning, wake up earlier than he does and kill him first. The idea that God counts the tears of a married woman. The fact that a woman can demand sex from her husband, but the husband can't demand it from the wife. And a myriad of other things that you have no idea is in that Torah, because you're looking at it from a perspective that the Torah doesn't live in. It is not the Old Testament. It is an everlasting covenant between God and His people. Shalom.